Hello, America. It shouldn't be hard for anyone to realize, a lot of people know there are fake things that are stacked in these databases. There are little tricks that people do to need to do this, relevant to where and to how a breaching method has applied. Syntactical responses, non-responses, and or counters to things that the breaching method caused and causes. Blamed effectively, it propagated them, blamed on other things, others themselves. And it sustained that as a form, while it was sustaining that, it correctly got everyone to self cultivate roles with that propagation and where and how it is relevant, where and how it is manifest, where and how we are fact keeping nature, where and how we are quality by fact keeping nature, conjunctive to what is hypernative. For example, to discern that which is actually hyper simultaneous, true always, and has a distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is inseparable from the extent we have. But also with that comes its complete identity of relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that. We could be systems other than this hypernative system, but it will just force demonstration. It will force Earth's a special difference as our own. Into that hyper additionally within as our own force from here, Earth as lethal IDs is more probably having been taught and used as a scientific value by the ancients. English is, and other ancient languages had more probably been revealed by means and needs and natures before the sciences became tactically, criminally foreign influence in semi-ancient times. And that means every single name of where the species body of volumes, the body of bodies is individually grouped in together. A breaching method extorted not only countries individually, but grouped to uses of criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and negative treatments and or identity treatments. And or they attach that person to fake words, fake everyone around them to fake words. And what it effectively maintains is relevant to where and to how each age of fact human nature too is sickly distinctly a victim to keep out sickly distinctly not only from being not discerned, self-valued where and how being not discerned by each. Effectively, this is relevant to where and how we have not used the hyperscope of having simultaneously black pupils, whites of eyes, and an extent of understanding of Native American history that is incomplete, not because it's not extensive enough, because we have left out phrases like criminal insidiousness and where and how it is relevant to criminal insidious natures of positive treatments and negative treatments and collusion. And that's someone, whenever there's a positive or negative treatment, there's an identity treatment. Wherever there's a value treatment, there's an identity treatment. And wherever there has been identity treatments, wherever there has been a value treatments, everyone has left out the increasing relevance of the increasing value of the reality of the breaching method. That was the sum of the laws, of the crazy, worse than witch trial laws, sickly distinctly against each colonist. Again, understanding that and how it was sustained against Native Americans, sickly distinctly from how it is now, sustained against each, sickly distinctly to keep effectively how sickly non distinctly from being discerned. So not one has learned. One of the ways, so this is manifest intercities of every state. And the ground difference is, since before our founding parents were even born, the suburbs have been designed tactically denatured. For example, relevant to the only increasing value of understanding how the humanity as the Native Americans had already been uh, affected by the breach of predicate acts delivery system method, which is simultaneously consciously a criminal insidiousness, natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, and identity treatments method. It was consciously to replace the elements of Native American education as it would have been and should have been preserved, because what it so it is to define it as that which is hyper native, that which is hyper invisible too, but still discernible to an extent. But this comes with a nature of contemplation that prayer is more probably having been originally used as a scientific value to speak about and to utilize, because it forces outside of interbranch locations where there are time impositions, where time is simultaneously can be used simultaneously too fast and simultaneously too slow to hurt people, to torture people. No. And for where and how, before the World Trade Center attack, there are names associated with the World Trade Center. God bless them. You know, this is a method that has forgiveness, because to discern that which is actually recorded, the breaching method, if you don't want to refer to it as a predicate acts, hyper predicate acts delivery system method, and/or as a hyper criminal insidiousness delivery system method. Nature itself is demonstrating means for us to discern criminal insidiousness, nature itself. No, positive natures of it too. Criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and negative treatments, blamed on other things, others, and or on selves, was, again, that's how they got, that was the means it could get to self-cultivate roles with uses of every identity of the ground location to exploit the hypernative identity of relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that, which is in demonstration to itself, where and how it demonstrates the only increasing value of understanding the breaching method that was the sum of the crazy, sick slavery method, sickly distinctly against every single colonist. And against every Native American. You have to keep this first, because then too, with the transition, now it's Americans, but slavery is still entrenched north and south, because the breaching method also had individually grouped in together different countries as surface names rolls with it. And this is where and how it propagated self-cultivated roles. With that propagation has propagated truths used for lies, and truths planted between, and with lies planted between truths. Criminal insidiousness natures of truth have only spoke for passions and emotions to know. And so there is a method and nature of extortion that comes with roles blaming other things or others ourselves. That method in nature of slavery. Wherever there is slavery, there is extortion. And how it stayed blamed on other things, others, or on selves, for example, that is hyper evidential. Any person who is honest knows that's already recorded. So we have to address crime methods, the identities of sophistication and non-sophistication, as strangers in the end or not, where and how they are kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts. Illusions, no. Finite, active, progressive illusions, and tactical delusions relevant. And to here where we've inherited still the course of black pupils and whites of eyes abridged. And so there's a man named Mr. Kaepernick with the NFL. You know, God bless him and anyone who tries to discern. But he's not speaking, or he's just taking a knee, no. And if you try to communicate with people through their Facebooks or social media, they go by what others tell them. See, before computers, there were the databases were involved. They were employed. Before all the known value treatments and employments with colonization and which trials we real or made up. Because too, it's involvement with slavery against everyone. Especially there's an extent we could discern it intellectually against every single person the second the subject's brought up. And that's not blamed. The breaching method. Where that is not happening, it is recorded how it is being self-valued. Blame just like the breaching method needs. Blamed on other things, others, ourselves, even when correct. See, the North and the South had roles with slavery. And the slavery they were talking about countering, and in other words, the slavery that those subject treatments are about countering, is not the slavery sickly distinctly against everyone, while simultaneously that one sickly non-distinctly, sickly distinctly and non-distinctly, and only increasingly. Because the roles with orchestration of slavery, or the furtherance of it, even if forced, it demonstrates, nature demonstrates, in other words, it's an identity of negative value nature progression relative to where and to how it will only stay positive to all parts of itself, space, nature, equally. And then further, where and how the relevance of Earth's a special difference. Therefore, it's forced away from here, lethal IDs. Forced space nature transfer. No, we have not had addressed roles self-value, pretending integrity, pretending not to be able to perceive how non-integrity can be associated with the stewards, associated with databases. One of the ways of mass victims only to miss that criminal incestuous nature of theater, it made theater notions of integrity, impressions, and people speaking about passions and emotions at each age, sickly, distinctly, dishonestly, relative to where, to how, till. The sequence shifts are relevant to where and how the experts are communicating. They have roles with dishonesty and consciously with uses, blaming other things, others, ourselves, per other influences, forcing that, tricking that, hurting that to be the outcome, and only capable of being reactions. Again, and or they attach that person to fake words. And, people, everyone around them. And then so that's sustained. So then they just exploit phenomena, where they people to fake conversations and they ask them all about that. or pretending to be asking about that. Then they get a truth and they use it for a lie. Investigators, investigations, and vetting identities private, including private investigators. Now, this is relevant to and as people involved with uses of corners of streets and uses of bottlenecks at, like with stop and shops, like where it used to be a food mart. It has nothing to do with what, if it's stop and shop, food mart, and the passions and emotions are screened for roles with unions, with the police forms, the FBI. There are other police forms, and there are political families associated with families that work with the unions, and the Weathersfield Police and the Rock Hill Police, Hartford Police, involved with stop and shops and those plazas, involved with all the food places. This is also relevant to where and to how the breaching method measures and maintains. Thank God for farmers and thank God for mass farming, because we're in a semi-ancient trap that is tactically denatured to force our reliance upon that where torture is relevant, where how our founders left us to communicate about this and about themselves and about ourselves, other than is tactically pretended. How this is gotten away with, and how it has been gotten away with so long. With the list of reasons is a common reason. And that's also, for example, where the relevance, the relativity of the breaching method, the relativity of understanding criminal insidiousness as a phrase, to understand criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatment, not just criminal insidiousness natures of negative treatments. See, this breaching method knew that they could build a pseudo sophistication, tactically ulterior from natures, in that would it keep in nature, that nature will continue to demonstrate to every single individual that and how we have needs, to use words like value in nature, per how it demonstrates, where how there is a identity of hyperconjunction to the identities of invisible but still discernible that we are directed to pay attention to. For example, like the subject, a distinct identity of volume where value is nature / nature is value from the predicate and from the other sciences, but also non-distinctly. And this being increasingly relevant where subjects like slavery require seriousness, and seriousness does not mean hurt. See, this thing Captain keeps people doing and saying whatever they have to do to keep things going before interbranch locations recorded a myriad of ways. Singularly, though, also how kept needing to, every day people going into courts. There were reported over 30 shootings in Hartford this year alone. There are only about 300 streets in Hartford, Connecticut. There are individuals with names that pretended conversations with me. They are involved with. Now there's only there are 365 days in each year. See, through our lives, unhindered, nothing got better relative to it. A better than perfect breaching method maintains complete possession over the 5 distinct identities of order. For example, that can't be invented. They are the perfect system. Any other system you can invent could be another system, can make positive things happen for this system, but the whole time it's demonstrating other than as being admitted, or than anyone could afford to admit, not by accident. We have the capability of understanding simultaneously. We have nature already understanding naturally. How we are hyper native, we understand that Native Americans had that breaching method sustained them against them, and we don't want it. See, they transfer that, making it blame England a name, make it blame this, that, leaving out how they themselves had that sustained upon them. All exception nature too. You have to understand sickly distinctly how our founding parents were fact treating nature enslaved. If they gave up their full roles and nature as they actually wanted and needed us to get the Constitution told to be gotten unabridged, they would have been sensed by the breaching method that had sustained those crazy laws. So they, while it was they were designed to keep anyone who was not entertaining criminal and ceaseless natures of positive or negative in identity treatments, and leaving out finite details, leaving out the value of sequence true, leaving out the relativity of uses of crazy things people say in stories, especially critically differentially when made up or not, too, which is also, thank God that no one could invent the way. The hyper simultaneous uses exceptions and exception nature distinctly from all others. Computers have to mimic this. So there are means to discern. So I'm not a brain surgeon, and I would not try to be a brain surgeon. But there are means recorded where how the brain surgeons left and leave out all kinds of natures of organized crime associated with the mental health, what they call mental health experts, and judges and prosecutors and personal ties and policing forms. For example, with Hartford Hospital, and on its hospital is the Institute of Living. So you have the private juxtaposed with the interbranch. We have an interbranch, various natures of courts and on off state judicial branch offices. On off the state, I thought it was they might have changed it. The prison offices, but there was the place right on between Hartford and Wethersfield on Franklin Avenue at the conjunction at the end of Franklin Avenue, Jordan Lane. In other words, the spots next to it, these are involved with the names involved with the World Trade Center on our side, but a whole bunch of countries who are involved here together. This is relevant to where and to how interbranch locations are being and having been used remotely. And so roles, needs, and natures like that, styles of logic, also are tactically delusions wrought. See, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal, but hyper evidentially recorded, we know on a mass scale, they've been using time simultaneously, too fast and too slow to get over on people, individually grouped in together. Whenever any color or is brought up, the value of understanding that how sickly, distinctly sustained against Native Americans, against people with black peoples and whites of eyes. That's all you need to know. You're being tortured. There's fake sciences leadership, no matter if you're of what you're called. Then we have people adopt the use of I'm white, and they punish you if you don't say that, and they punish you if you do, because these are fake sides. These are applications of difference tactical ulterior from its course. What difference is positive when it's about correlation? Because correlation is positive when it's about hypercorrelation. Not, and that is using that definition of hypersimultaneous. That is distinct from, while non-distinct from. Why and how we are an identity of volume distinct as an individual. That's simultaneously being distinctly a volume as grouped, ages, areas, sexes, locations. An experience relevant through a filter. And that, again, is part of the reason the value of Native American, understanding that breaching method against them sickly distinctly first, while non distinctly too, was while it was first. In other words, we are a volume science individual that uses why and how we are individuals, how we are grouped, and how ages, areas. This conversation was had by the ancients more probably and demonstrably, and they realized it's about the hyper invisible because it has a conjunction to the subject, not just to the sentence. It has a conjunction to the difference, to and as the difference between criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments are positive treatments that is of that nature that reveals evolution's fruits and gifts and means from nowhere. Charged. See, everyone speaks for charge. They were backed into, just like the gangs were backed into killing people and shootings every year relative to the number of the streets. That's just the shootings. That doesn't leave out the other forms of violence. And even that leaves out what really sequentially happened first. And that left out and leaves out the fact cheating nature oriented predicate acts methods. If you use fact cheating nature predicate acts and that's being and having been exploited, as we know it is, there are streams of people going to courts each day, relevant to the only increasing value of the understanding that and how the suburbs were tactically denatured before our founders were even born, how they were designed. Uses of the corners of streets were already effectively having been employed by that which came before employments, but it was with the employments too. Specifically, so if we would describe the breaching method, we would have to describe it and discern it juxtaposed with and through names of identity ground locations and names, around everyone to do so in ways that no one would be able to afford, increasingly, simultaneously, preemptively, actively, and progressively. And that too relevant to needs to address how sickly distinctly each age had to consider the same way the Native American rights are forsaken, elderly rights are forsaken. We have a natural means. And to use passions and emotions. That is being and having been offensively, preemptively, being actively. We know that we could discern roles with this. But we have to be led by the hyper invisible. We have to blame the breaching method itself. And then see what can't. And still to try to talk, well, look, we're countering this. These are not means. One of the ways they get over is where they have the meals scheduled at locations. See, all locations were used criminally, remotely, criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions wrought. And that is increasingly needed to be understood where if we're going to have proper care and seriousness for a subject like slavery, where they brought up black and white, they bring up the course of our native course abridged. They bring up aggression. They have recorded needs means to control aggression, to have people describe people's behavior, leaving out what came first. Where and how there are means demonstrated, where how relevant is differential criminally foreign influence. See, this is where good people become and stay evil, forms of evil, as collusion, /S, with that singular breaching method that, again, now can only be discerned. It can be discerned directly, but that makes that triggers upon sense and sensibilities of people that were already forged reliant upon illusions and databases, relevant to where and to how the intelligence community, interbranch all exceptions tied to them, hundreds of countries or areas of criminal enterprises, private ones, in that insidiousness of people A through Z, how they are kept needing to hide the same, left out finite details and uses of that, also being and having been used by other. And they know that, but they don't know the extent of it. And this is where and how, for example, this is relevant, where and how interbranch prevents writing. In other cases, they make exceptions criminally. And again, we're going to use that which is hyper evidential, where and how they got away with pretending to care about legitimate evidence uses or legitimate truth uses. And where anyone is standing who pretends that the law has been spoken for. Anyone could see pictures of cities throughout America, throughout the world. Anyone properly educated could discern how the suburbs were since before our founding parents were even born. The design of them had already been conceived. It is already relevant to that role, to roles, and as roles with that method sickly distinctly as a worse than war crime method against the Native Americans. Sickly distinctly against everyone to keep employed, everyone against everyone, and against themselves. And having nature maintain demonstration of that. Because while that's and how that's being demonstrated, everyone's preventing anyone from blaming the breaching method properly. And everyone already did it and does it. So if you say the branches of government with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and criminal insidious natures of people A through Z, simultaneously, they were conceived. And they were measured and maintained, having been effectively maintained, self-cultivated, self-screened, entrenchments roles, with that breaching method leveraged against each one of our founders, and including the ones that had to be counter-extorted by our actual founders through James Madison and through Native Americans. See, Chief. So that's evidence itself. And simultaneously with the breaching method, we know, sustained against them. With those criminal insidious natures of positive and negative treatments that we know as the arrays of opinions regarding differences with the species body, actually how grouped individuals and species body of volume, humanities. So we know these things, but we're we're not being, they're hiding what I caught them doing with all locations, the breaching method. And they've gotten away with it because it came through our own. So Interbranch has been switching names. For example, they've been hiding this from Judge Napolitano. There are proofs that they've been using how they have roles with FISA courts and military families that since they were kids were involved with tricks with databases, with natures of identity thefts and frauds relevant to this, where it, again, begins and stays increasingly, though, about the positive and negative treatments and identity treatments. Stacey Lurch, a man who thinks I must be in imminent danger. Stacey, the environment, there were like hardly any worms left in the earth. The worms used to walk into the puddles in the rain. They used to walk into the bodies of the water. The ponds they used to have healthy, land next to it, there would always be worms in the bottom. So they're feeding the crawfish. They're feeding the other, things in there that the food cycle was way more dynamic and could and should be way more dynamic than it is. But see, we have a tactical possession over our positive and negative treatments. And relative to the breaching method it employed, mass farming needed by us. It employed the farmers, sickly, distinctly victims of a breaching method, and hyper victims, because victims is to our own, and hyper victims is to our own too. But there are three distinct identities of hyper criminal insidiousness, discernible. As we discern and use the value of where and how the sciences share an identity, for example, as is evidence, where and how properly, where and how the predicate of is value to the identity of the law, the predicate act. Now, the predicate act shows an identity of criminal insidiousness nature. It shows an identity that has an identity of relationship. To the value of sequence, to the value of finite grouped and overall details that they cannot afford. Connected. And with those conjunctions they cannot afford. The answers of evolution, the answers of science, the answers of evolution sciences should only feel like games. We have it the other. We have tactically altered other. And so it's not A or B. It is constantly to be led by what is true always, not denying any exceptions. And that is being led by what is A. What is simultaneous? What is A, B, in the slightest detail it doesn't leave out. No, so to do this, we know that we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and that the colonists like us had that, and so they had means inherent, active, progressive, increasingly to discern that a breaching method was right there to be blamed for the crazy laws that made them where they should fear and where they should not fear simultaneously. Identity has conjunction to what is positive, and to what is negative simultaneously, and as values do in demonstration of this. It is the course that is greater than and more finite than math, while as its value system, as the value of its value system of electronics. The proper way to explain where they have to refer to it as theory, science, because they have not agreed how to explain the phenomenon. They have agreed to call it. No, where they've agreed to teach that an electron relationship to the conductive materials, be it a wire or you know, or as those associated with circuit boards. In electronics, in other words, this is about positive and negative. And where we need to use criminal insidiousness as a phrase with young kids. See, but we have there are only three branches of government. Those are three identities of sophistication. Where and how all identities of sophistication and of non-sophistication are as actually recorded being and having been fit to collusions with all natures of like time treatments, all kinds of qualities of fact treatment nature, aspects of fact treatment nature, and nature treatments that could not and cannot defend themselves and afford critical examination of it. And so so increasingly people have to self-value how criminally set up fake exceptions as illusions, as roles with predicate act methods that are singularly bound by hyper predicate acts delivery system method, singular, as that which is the subject of slavery. Also, evidence of this is who would deny it will have with their quality of fact treatment nature, with their aspect of fact treatment nature, and with their nature of themselves, demonstration of it. See, but how this has not been, we know this, but how it has not been demonstrated has to do with how it was recorded that Connecticut interbranch leaders are effectively maintained self-value roles with methods like switching names and switching sequences, while simultaneously roles themselves and with others differentially stacking fabricated audio and video as roles with crime scenes increasingly against innocent people and as collusions with killers, and even as the people that are punishing them, and uses of them after too, because they already had to keep increasingly hid what nature is increasingly actually demonstrating and actually capable of demonstrating too, and through and as each as we actually are, not for the breaching method. See Black History by Anthony Wall, the music. So everybody left this conversation. So New York City, people stacked for fabricated audio and video on off the rolls in Connecticut locations, and rolls with stacking sequence shifts in Connecticut courts and other natures of federal crime, stacking illusions spoken and formally stacked into databases typed pretended conversations. These people did this with the news, through legal administration. Through different political parties, administrations. These are uses of town offices and of their roles with our fake representatives' roles. How these are people that are good people too. We have to examine what is actually recorded. Our breaching method applications and self-defenses of people describing others as good or bad, where and how they left out what has been effectively maintained collusions on and off campuses of age and nature everywhere they are, overtly / insidiously, sickly distinctly, while also simultaneously non-distinctly. New York City has fake things being stacked in databases and has roles with each age against their own, because each age is simultaneously collusion with the other ages, where and how effectively employed, where other things others are and or ourselves to be blamed for what with the breaching method effectively correctly knew that nature will keep demonstrating into and as natures that increasingly would need to self-value other things others are self blame where and how they have to pretend they can speak for the nature of the law. All they have to do is admit that they have nuclear weapons, they have machine guns, let alone but should even come to nuclear weapons and bombs. But people don't have the they don't have peace and hyper peace discerned distinctly from each other. There are criminal insidious natures of peace that have only been self-valued as is actually recorded if we use that which is hyper-evidential. So we have to address uses of words like evidence. We have to address whole wire crime acts and methods and whole mail crime acts and methods effectively used, for example, to keep a whole bunch of people needing to use other people's names out of sequence, needing to self-value roles with that used where everyone goes too. People don't want to go into the finite detail with others, and then they self-value that the ones pretending to do that. So we're supposed to have things put on paper. So the interbranch locations, they have a whole bunch of crime acts and methods originally and still that they use that prevent a quality of fact keeping nature proper at their locations. And they have roles with wire crime methods with phones and with the news media broadcasting with their phones too. And increasingly that's sustained is increasingly at their homes and uses of their kids and uses of each age of their campus, their people associated with what is recorded simultaneously, evidential, relevant to where and to how you have elderly homes, relevant to where and to how you have labeled poverty, that which left out the torture involved, that which left out the identity theft fraud method, and roles pretending others simultaneously, communicating that. So we're going to address this. We're going to address. So the Institute of Living was founded on the Hartford campus of Hartford Hospital in 1822. And they have people involved like a Leahy family and a Lombardo family is involved with predicate acts with interbranch family members around me through time as people involved with planting little tricks and fake things into databases through time. Also through other influences. So they can pretend, which they're recorded doing, that we're bringing up their names because that we're the ones brought it up. So these are people are sequence shifting at locations. Now it was proven there was post-dated documents. There were post-dated documents post-dated from inside the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center towers right before the attack in Manhattan. The names associated with that hasn't been proven in court, but it's recorded. They have been roles also with cases using court cases, and they've been lying about the outcome of court cases too, with the news media also inclusion with judges and prosecutors and the police forms that have been involved with retired and standing interbranch and the thing involved with a whole bunch of uses of areas of work, criminal enterprises, and private ones relevant. So it's also names that have a whole bunch of ties to the spots next to the state capitol in Connecticut. So they could take pictures and make it look like I know people I don't. They exploit a phenomenon where there is a theater between and has the value of the sociological interactions, narratives, and natures regarding them, and regarding the with the suburbs and with the cities sickly distinctly, And that theater as criminal insidiousness was designed by the breaching method before our founders were even born and before cars. So there's no doubt that there are all kinds of aspects and natures about our suburbs, let alone the cities. They're designed for a breaching method that juxtaposed more bad things against everybody than there are streets in our cities and in our towns. And they have individuals who are roles with collusions. And they have narratives regarding things like value and nature and money, and money, where they left out their roles of wire crime acts and methods, male crimes, drugs and medicines crimes, sexual crimes. We have female judges recorded how to maintain self-valued roles with investigators, sick men involved with sexual, medical, judicial, and other natures of crimes against little boys and girls from their positions. You know, so we're examining. The Central Connecticut State University has a whole bunch of men. I don't know what this man Poisson must look like a degenerate like this Roger Suzanne. There's a Roger Suzanne and attached me to fake conversations with him himself. He's involved with various natures of courts, judges, and prosecutors, even female judges. They influence the roles, trusting men and women, speaking to them who are sick, fake punks. You're gonna apologize too to the female black judge and female white judge distinctly too, because you're only capable of doing it sickly. But I'm gonna make you do it right too. Those of you who know you're involved. And now there are also people that work with. I don't know this. There's a Celeste Wells. She's one of the people they made an exception by having her appear in front of me. And there are proofs they might have taken a picture of that when it happened when I was in middle school. Never had a class with her. In other words, this is where and how they have people involved with Facebook and with all the social media who rely on information and databases dishonestly as criminal insidiousness nature. This is also relevant increasingly to where and to how they recorded themselves pretending the value of an oath to be other than it was and is, per their styles of hiding details, of hiding the value of sequence drill. So there are means recorded to observe treatments of the January 6th and natures and reactions and non-reactions, and people attached to faked words and changed words were all with ties. And there were all kinds of uses of them there, but there was also singular use of them. Also, there were a number of people with Washington, D.C. involved with the phenomenon of having had involved with names that had conversations with teachers I had and ones I never had a conversation with, like where I was forced to speak through others and how per some of the tricks involved with a whole bunch of names at Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College associated with a Joshua Stryker and a Mark Violet and a Mike Violet and men and women associated with their family and with their location where they live. And schools, these are people involved with names next to schools who also have roles with criminally foreign influence uses of investigations, of investigators, and of relevant confessions. Also, where the confessions are sometimes they're spoken, sometimes they are communicated. And this is also relevant where people simultaneously pretend they believe and are going to pretend other. As part of threaten people not to say anything about what they caught them doing. There's a Trentolo have women that work for them involved with some judges and prosecutors and child sex offenders with various Connecticut news media that has been involved with various stories criminally and locations. Tied also to criminal natures of positories, not personal too. They also sequence shifting regarding that. These are Connecticut names involved with interbranch locations criminally that also have roles with on and off the World Trade Center attack with sequence shifts, criminally foreign influence roles with the family of a Dr. Shub, associated with probate court in Hartford. His wife worked for it, per him, and per others involved with other Hartford courts, involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in his defendant capacities, and his co-defendants who were proven various natures of federal criminals from other natures of cases. They were already, before that, having been involved with predicate acts against me and up leading up to that and since. So the courts and their family members themselves have roles of drugs and medicines crimes and child abuses of juxtaposed natures, even sexual, and how they have women roles with it has to do with where and how they've been planting evidences as roles with relevant to where and how they have fact treatment nature and evidence predicate acts roles, federal rules of evidences, crimes, and uses of them, uses of families that work with intelligence community. Like Spider Family, I don't know the Spider Family. They were influenced to pretend fake exceptions, mixed with completely made up, and some I don't. Has something to do with it with the Cololo family that the Wethersfield police called me and confessed, recorded, involved. Then I make some confessions, switching and forging names, and fabricating police reports, fake conversations with me, fake ties with me and their police, because they backed themselves in corners when I caught them involved with predicate acts that they shouldn't have hid from the parents and from the school. The school, the school made good confessions, but there were judges and prosecutors and foreign and domestic families involved with kids on and off the schools I went to, and conjunctions made for them that are relevant, because it also shows that where and how people are needing to hide they're needing to pretend they have motivations that are good sometimes and that are bad, but because there were other motivations involved that needed to be hit and that are needed to be hit increasingly, where and how they've been using remotely, like they're only capable of being natures in response to how when they hear someone say there were sequence shifts in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center towers. See, we have we have employments of the identities of the law, of their locations, that are a certain type of victim, sickly distinctly from from the shooters, with the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, and or they're just the gangs, and relevant to what is recorded, what is actually recorded, and capable of being discerned by all, is conscious uses of a singular method on off all the campuses in New York City, and New York City, and in Hartford, Connecticut, sickly distinctly from the on off the schools in Wethersfield, New Britain, West Hartford. These are towns in Cromwell. These are towns where they have names and families next to the schools, with houses and businesses, where they are fit, needing to time to hide illusions and roles with lie progressions, where and how they have confessions. Again, where those confessions are relevant to where and how, for example, they got away with blaming other things, others ourselves, than the breaching method for what caused the course of whites of eyes and black pupils to be abridged, and what caused entertained counters to slavery as collusion in our faces, overtly / insidiously. People know this. Don't respond to this unless you're going to respond. I have to say that stuff up front because people want to just keep talking like they could pretend they could speak for practical reason. Use Emmanuel Kant's phrase. This is where no one is leading the ship. Countries individually grouped in together cannot speak for themselves. They cannot defend the logic they have already been locked into, and ourselves at the same time. So they value uses of the social media, getting involved with making opinions about people's behavior, with instances that leave out what came first, with what's, so they value mass problems of misinformation. So they could blame they could just go say they're trying to counter misinformation. They're getting themselves involved with stuff they don't know about. And we have to address how the courts, the military, all the exception nature tied to the interbranch are kept with the overt criminal enterprises, private one in the insidiousness of people A through Z, how kept needing to find how the same sequence shifts, find active progressive lies. And I don't know the Daryl Chandler. He pretended other. And the exception that was years after, real fast he made fake things tied to the first time. I don't know his sister's name. I never met her in my life. These are people involved with the intelligence community in Newington and in Wethersfield, also involved with the wire crimes of Wethersfield police. And with that have been fabricating evidences with areas of overt criminal enterprises and roles with the confessions of the Cololos and of the Wethersfield police regarding the switching forging names, and with the child sex offenders. There's a Bob Chase that confessed about Phil Cololos further involved with him with this. He's got crimes with various natures of courts, and with him simultaneously pretending not to realize, with physical delusions too, all kinds of federal evidence crimes, and roles personally with names with involved with through time with forensics locations, like Whiting Forensics Locations has roles with various natures of criminals that have been roles with narratives and natures that have been criminally involved with uses of corners of streets on Fairlane Drive. It's recorded involved with uses of a reported break-in at the home of the house of Fairlane Drive and Carriage Hill Drive. That has also roles with a whole bunch of people tied to a Klotz family. That have also had roles with relevant home break-ins and narratives where judges and prosecutors have been speaking fake things into records, and with mayors and with other countries and areas, gangs and sick people, because they've been planting evidences at locations because they've been roles with those things recorded. We have to address, like remote criminally foreign influence uses of interbranch locations, of which there are only 3, and of all exception nature tied to them increasingly. Sandy Hook Newtown has a whole bunch of names involved with people on the child sex offender registry who were then and now involved first with crimes with databases, child abuses, elderly abuse at the same time. Now they force people to make exceptions, and they leave out. Maybe someone raise their voice, and then they'll make all kinds of stuff up. And then people will say things like, I'll kill you or something like that. Like, no, not kill. That's different. People say they'll hurt someone because that's what they're going to do. When the interbranch, see, but the interbranch, they'll hurt me. They know they're going to get away with it. In other words, they could hurt them just by telling the truth. What they are recorded, knowing they are a being and haven't been involved with. Same way with witch trials, even if it was made up, is effectively recorded being and having been involved, effectively used to measure and to maintain other blamed for those crazy laws that were involved with the slavery. That we shouldn't even have to be speaking at each age of fact. Nature needs to have this done real fast, where you understand that criminal incidence nature method singular against Native Americans sustained, and the employments of the plural criminal insidious natures of things, of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. sustained. And then juxtaposed with that is a hyper additional economy and those economic narratives and natures and needs. It's all right if you want to have opinions. Get on the goddamn paper, though. Don't fucking make me beg, excuse my language. Don't make me beg online for response. I asked them when I was there, Interbranch, to play games and put fake things in the databases since I was a kid. Whole bunch of people tied to Mendez brothers on and off Fox Connecticut News, on off the state capitol, involved with the Yukon too. A whole bunch of people retired and standing involved with Yukon. You sick fakes with the psychology. We're going to delineate your physical delusions from your criminally foreign influenced souls. And I'm speaking to the names of you. Don't pretend you're going to use the names of these colleges, because those aren't living things. You guys are living fakes. We're gonna address your roles with the predicate acts on off Trinity College, with the police associated with you, and with the FBI, and associated with this Joshua, with this what's his name, Mark Violet, and his mother's name. I don't know his mother's name. And now these are people involved with the police forms interstates through time. I just remind, make sure you get them on paper fast. Make sure I get a paper. Yukon, make sure I get a paper on response. Get them the one name and sequence on paper now with the Wethersfield Police. Get them on paper now. No, with the campus of the principal child defender. I want them on paper now. That's mandated by mandated law. If you want to say that it's not, put that on paper. Pick one name and sequence and say sorry to Judge Napolitano, because make sure you apologize to lying to him. Make sure you get me a response for that. Why I haven't a response from them too. Make sure.